Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here today. Before we get started, we wanted to just make some announcements about some grant opportunities that MAWCA has for our membership. I'm Celeste, the current MAWCA Pres, and have the honor of being a part of this group and just so excited for the important work that we're doing in our community. So one of our newer grants that we have available is a COVID-19 emergency grant. It's no secret that writing centers are underfunded, and in times of crisis, this can be magnified. So this opportunity is for center directors to apply, writing center programs to apply for grants up to $1,000 to cover things such as staffing or administrative support. You can also use this grant for purchasing materials that you might need for training, one-time technology purchases, seed money to develop research projects around COVID-19, and also maybe holding workshops or events that you see relevant at this time. And we also, another grant that we currently have available is a MAWCA research grant for the advancement of underrepresented writing center professionals. So this grant is an award up to $1,000, and it assists writing center administrators from underrepresented populations in the Mid-Atlantic region. So our goal in funding this grant is to give back to our members and to the community, and diversify the scholarship that's being produced in our region. So these grants are available to administrators of color and administrators from historically underserved populations, and it covers costs associated with research that you're doing in your area. So for more information on these grants, you can visit our website at MAWCA.org. And if you are not a current MAWCA member and you are thinking about becoming one, please visit MAWCA.org and you can learn how to register there. And we also currently offer regional grants ongoing. So if you have events or programs or workshops you'd like to start in your region, there's some startup funds for those as well. So visit us on MAWCA.org, and we hope to continue these conversations through some of the grants that we can offer and programs that we have available. So I will turn it over back to you, Stacy, if you want to introduce our keynote.
Okay, I'm sorry guys, I'm working on the closed captioning, but I'm running into a little bit of trouble integrating it. So I'll get that working in just a second. So first, I just want to introduce, we have our interpreter here, somewhere here, Latanya. Yes, all right. So if anybody needs ASL interpreter, there is an interpreter, Latanya. She's here, and if you just pin her video, then you will be able to receive that kind of interpretation. Today we have David Kelly. David Kelly has agreed to do our keynote. His background is in conflict management. And also he is a part of the Writing Center community. So we're very lucky to have him here today. So thank you so much, David. I really appreciate you coming and sharing your scholarship with us. It really is a gift. So without further ado, David, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Thank you, Stacy. First, I want to say thank you to MAWCA for giving me this platform to speak. I see you, Latanya. I see you out there with your language interpretation. I'm here for it. And so I was asked to talk to you all about anti-racist pedagogy and writing centers. So I'll talk to you all from the context of my own academic discipline, negotiations and conflict management. I will offer you tools to do your own work, to engage in the critical process of resisting oppression and racism in the Writing Center. And just so we're on the same page, when I say critical, I'm talking about critical theory critical, the social philosophy pertaining to the reflective assessment and critique of society and culture in order to reveal and challenge power critical, to reveal and challenge power structures critical. Over the last 2 years, I attended a few Writing Center conferences and heard many keynote speakers address some version of this topic: diversity, inclusion, social justice, decolonialism, anti-racism. We can go on and on. The goal at these conferences is to share our practice with our peers, each other, to reflect and critique this historically oppressive system of language, standard American English, so that we can challenge the institution. And yet here I am, asked to talk to y'all about things we've been talking about. How long y'all been doing this at these conferences now? What have y'all been doing since the last time we met? What have y'all really been doing? It's exhausting that my chocolate brown skin, my Blackness, both culturally and race, is the object of relative and objective oppression, and at the same time, a great source of pride and resilience. And to be honest, this is hard work for me. But guess what? I still showed up under the weight of the collective and respective trauma that is white saviorism, COVID-19, and the merciless killing of Black people in this country. I showed up. Nisha Ann Green at the BMET Tutor Conference last fall so eloquently was like, I choose to believe you're here because you are invested in truly doing this work and in doing it right. So I offer you this disclaimer. It is quite likely that I will piss you off. Know that I piss you off out of love. I piss you off because there are lives at stake. And I would rather have you pissed off and uncomfortable for a few minutes than for us to keep living the way we are. She went on and said, you'll be uncomfortable at times, but know that that is when you are in the right spot to tackle such complicated issues. It is out of that uncomfortable spot that we can bring about real change that can take root. The thing about this anti-racist work is that everyone keeps asking what's next. How do we get it done? My goal is to get you to stop asking that question and instead get about the business of doing. And when I listened to her give that keynote, it shook me up. It shook me up. And so I'm not going to suggest any books or literature because all of us have Google or access to databases at our institutions. I will, however, offer you with some names, and this is only for the benefit of those of y'all that's new to this. Nisha Ann Green, David Bartholomew, Rashawn Young, Beth Godby, Lisa Del Pitt, Romeo Garcia, Asal Inouye, Bell Hooks, Andrea Lunsford, Frankie Condon. I'll say it again. Nisha Ann Green, David Bartholomew, Rashawn Young, Beth Godby, Lisa Delpit, Romeo Garcia, Asal Inouye, Bell Hooks, Andrea Lunsford, Frankie Condon. And that's just to name a few. Next, I want to say this to all of you. The energy you bring to your coursework, your scholarship, or anything else you want more understanding about to make a decision, keep that same energy, that same vigor, curiosity, engagement in the positions you take when it comes to this anti-racism in writing centers. We got to get more radical, y'all. Radical like nourishing the critical spirit, like making a commitment to more engagement in the effort to transform our concrete objective reality, our writing centers. And so again, my contribution to the resistance is tools, not to give you answers, but to make you more accountable for yourself, with your friends, your colleagues, in your community, in your writing center, in your institution. You must engage in the critical process. And so to quote Romeo Garcia's grandmother, te digo, estoy para que sepas y aprendes. So y'all ready? Y'all ready to to get into this? Y'all ready to get started? Let me get a reaction out in the masses. All right. So why am I here? Why me? Does any one person want to just jump out there real quick and answer that? Why me? Why am I here? Somebody, one person, jump out.
To challenge us, to inspire us to think.
Thank you. Thanks, Jen. That is an answer.
Are we all muted? I can take a guess, but hold on.
A more obvious answer, though, is because I'm Black, right? I must have a solution. I must know the answer. But more than me being Black, I'm a scholar. I earned my master's in negotiations and conflict management at the University of Baltimore. My disciplinary expertise is in analyzing systems and institutions of oppression right here in our own backyard, and those effects on marginalized groups, namely my people. Now that I brought it up, I'm sure you want me to tell you the research question from my capstone project, right? My research question was, can white privilege serve as a form of domestic terrorism for Black Americans in the US through the institution of policing? Yeah, I went that hard. I did a qualitative analysis using archival data sources and coding to try and draw these thematic connections between the system of policing and how that systemically impacts and kills Black people. But this methodology was limited. I wasn't able to conclude that this system of whiteness policing terrorizes and ultimately leads to the untimely death of our Black mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, childhood friends. This is by design. This system of higher education places value on assessing the validity of observed observations. This is by design. This system of higher education places high value on assessing the validity of observed information we see in based on deductive reasoning. And at the same time, my IG is flooded right now with this newest swell of anti-Black racism. IG showed me the killing of George Floyd at the hands of the police. But it didn't start with Floyd, and it certainly hasn't ended. The police have killed Breonna Taylor, Trayvon Martin, Eric Gardner, Philando Castile, Stephon Clark, Tatiana Jefferson, Tamir Rice, Tanisha Anderson, Sandra Bland, Emmett Till. Even though the police that killed him, they were in plain clothes, but they killed him nonetheless. And countless others. And so I guess what I'm getting at is that I do this work because your systems of whiteness, this social and political construction, this vast net of learned behaviors that have been passed down and inherited as privilege is killing us. Court systems, housing systems, education systems. Your whiteness is killing us. And the Writing Center is no different. When I was a consultant, in 2018, I wrote a blog post titled Errors, Mistakes, and Rhetorical Choices in My Code Meshed English. Writing this post made me more aware of the power of my words and the choices I make in writing. It was a challenge. It was a challenge for me to write in my most authentic code mesh voice. My goal in the post is to demonstrate a point about the understandability of code meshed English in a particular genre, blogging. Hell, I'm code meshing with y'all now. Y'all just not reading it. Y'all are listening to it. And I acknowledge my privilege, even as a Black man, that I internalized white English as a kid, in school, in my writing. I had the benefit of access and resources via school systems. I'm an Army brat, so I've lived all over. I've always been able to write good enough in grade school, as an undergrad, in grad school. And because I could write good or perform the grammatical and syntactic conventions that's socially enforced, largely due to colonialism, my work has always been given the benefit of the doubt. I got good at jumping through hoops, I guess. And so I see that experience writing that blog now almost as a scaffolded writing up exercise. And if you're not sure what writing up is, I'll throw you a breadcrumb. Beth Godby talks about it in her article about epistemic rights. And so in my mind, that blog represents a bridge, a possibility. It's certainly a model for writers to affirm the value of their counter-rhetorical narratives. The article was published to the University of Baltimore's Writing Center blog. I also sent the post to colleagues around the university. I got a lot of really good feedback about the rhetorical moves I made and how skilled of a writer I was, and all that great stuff that we want to hear as writers about all the good things that we're doing, right? But I also got mixed reviews, passive-aggressive reviews. You know how it feels when someone gives you a backhanded compliment, right? Yeah, we've gotten backhanded compliments before. That's how it felt. So I'm over here thinking at the passive-aggressive comments, this is how you really feel? Knowing that I'm a skilled and effective enough writer to bend genre conventions and intentionally make code mesh rhetorical moves? That's how you feel? Then how do you really feel about Black students who are beginning to invent the university, who are continuing to invent the university? How do those attitudes show up in your pedagogies? I'll tell you. It shows up as perceived deficits, weaponized as aggressions, making Black students feel visible and hypervisible at the same damn time. The compounding effects of this injustice contradict the privilege and authority Bartholomew tells us all writers at the university need to invent the university, that all writers need to invent the university. But I forgot. This system wasn't really meant for people who look like me. And so I went on to write a paper from MAWCA in the spring of 2019 titled Reinventing the Writing Center, Bridging Understanding Between Socioeconomics, Epistemic Justice, and Discourse Performance. I wanted to further draw attention to the socio-political context that minoritized writers, namely Black writers, encounter when attempting to, quote, try on the particular ways of knowing, selecting, evaluating, reporting, concluding, and arguing that define the discourse of their community. By the time I presented this paper, I started teaching my first college class at a Baltimore City school to high school juniors. I was teaching them RIT 101. And as I reflect on, as I reflect on my experience consulting, fellowing at both the graduate and doctoral level, and teaching for what's now been three semesters, and additionally leading a writing center, I often think about that blog post I wrote. I talked about how the homogeny of higher education gives preference to your standard American English, and at the same time perpetuates systemic violence on our Black voices. Our ability to assimilate to your standard American English, in effect, is measured by our ability to make as few mistakes and errors as possible. The fact of the matter is, the implications are different for writers who look like me. When you police those errors, mistakes, or rhetorical choices, instead of Instead of inquiring about the rhetorical situation from the basis of genre convention, clarity, elaboration, or understanding of ideas, your enforcement of the grammatics and syntactics of your standard American English intends to preserve white middle class English at the expense of our invention of the university, evidenced in our lived experiences. So what did I do? In consultations, I started focusing more on transfer and scaffolding. I asked questions, and more importantly, I listened. I gave more context about genre conventions and how they shift based on audience expectations. Instead of focusing so explicitly on grammar and syntax, I focused on the ideas behind the grammar and syntax. Discussion is part of the writing process too, right? And so with more clarity about their own ideas on a topic and explicit transfer of rhetorical situations, including the socio-political context of systemic and institutional oppression, students are in better positions to take more agency over their writing. I've nowhere near perfected my method, I assure you of that. Each student's needs are different, and because of those differences, I tailor my response to the needs of the student and their paper. I recognize that undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral students' writing needs are similar and yet so different. And embedded in those institutionally contextual similarities and differences is the student. At the University of Baltimore, the majority of the student population is Black. I've met with a gambit of Black writers, and what I can say is that our lived experiences have impacted the way we write, just as the lived experiences of other races and ethnicities impact the way that they write. So based on the writer's prioritized needs, I try to strike a balance between giving them the tools and strategies they need to write more effectively, and at the same time trying to minimize the structural violence of rhetorical whitewashing in higher education. As an adjunct professor of undergrad writing, I knew I wanted to practice more labor-based assessments of my students' writing. Maureen Barney, one of my mentors, understood what I was trying to do. She put me onto Asl Interpreter. I haven't read enough of his work, and I need to. But she told me about his work on labor-based grading. Our discussion gave me enough to move in a direction that already felt intuitive, to know that I wanted to emphasize on the drafting process, feedback, better understanding of rhetorical situations, transfer knowledge from other contexts. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? And so for the last 3 semesters I've taught, part of my labor-based practice is that my students automatically get points for grammar and syntax on assignments. I will say the only assignment that I do grade them for on grammar and syntax is when we are working on a employment packet. And I tell them the reason I grade them on syntax for that particular assignment is because of the implications of their employability, which is connected to their social upward mobility financially and whatnot like that. And so at the beginning of the semester, I discuss my practice with them. And I repeat it to them for each assignment, why I give the points for grammar and syntax. At the beginning of the semester, we read and discuss Vershawn Young's Should Writers Use Their Own English and sections from Godby's article about epistemic rights. I explain the rationale for my values and pedagogy. I do my best to teach writing as part of a bigger social, political, and economic context that is evidenced in the inequitable distribution of resources and access to practice writing. So this is my way of leveling the playing field. By having students engage in writing as a process through scaffolded drafting, modeling academic genre conventions for them to blend in their writing, I was able to assess my students more individually on the labor of their invention. I know it sounds all neat and tidy as a process, but again, it's not. I put in mad effort to shift the narrative of their past experiences with writing. I humble myself. I ask them to trust me. I implicitly ask them through explicit cueing to integrate, establish a common understanding for how we all know what we know and how that impacts our ability to make intentional social and political decisions in writing. All of my students don't buy my message or trust my authority. I had an incident, a Karen Light incident in one of my classes. This particular student challenged my authority every chance she could get. But guess what? I made her work. Not just her. I made all my students work, but I made her work. I wanted to make sure she remembered me. That experience in class, that time that we spent together. But mostly, I wanted her to remember me because I'm out here, I'm Black, I'm doing this, I have something you need. And so in one of our classes, we were discussing differences in tone, voice, and persona based on based on the rhetorical situation, including genre and all that other stuff. Having the language and backdrop of Rashawn Young and Godby, the discussion shifted indirectly to code meshing through a sharp microaggression. The student, Karen Light, made a triggering comment about how slang isn't appropriate in professional writing. She said it with a certain sting that all the Black students could feel, including me. POCs. Y'all know that universal look we sometimes give each other when we see or hear some of the questionable things white people do. Long story short, I assessed and adapted to the moment to have a deeper dialogue about slang, Black vernacular, code switching, code meshing, appropriation, juxtaposed a rhetorical situation. Our broader rhetorical situation is also the difference in genre expectations across disciplines. Writers in arts disciplines might be able to take more liberties with language and writing because of the boundaries of the wider institutionally accepted context of the field, whereas writing in science disciplines tend to be more grounded in the conventions of public administration, business, and the social sciences. However, there could be times in both academic tracks, depending on the coursework, where students might intentionally make rhetorical choices in their English to give context, perspective, or to make a point. But back to Karen Light. She got an A in my class. She earned it. She had the practice. And she also learned some things that she didn't know that will help her well beyond my class. I'd like to think she remembers me, but who knows? I have other stories, but for the sake of time, I was called again. I was called again in the fall of 2019 by Maureen Barney to collaborate with Amanda Fields to develop and facilitate the featured workshop at the BMET Tutor Conference titled Challenging Cultural Conflicts Through Writing Center Mission Statements. And at the same time, I accepted this role as Interim Writing Services Coordinator and Director of the Writing Center at the University of Baltimore. I'm legit now, I got all my benefits. In a relatively short period of time, I find myself in this position of power with this platform. I profess to y'all that I'm here for this anti-racist work. I've learned a lot in a short amount of time. I inherited a writing center that was already grappling with race, class, and power in the writing center. And I'm fortunate that the scaffolding was there to get me through this last year, almost to the date. In my writing center, our training priorities for the semester come from the reflections of some of the environmental and contextual factors of consultations that happened during the academic year. And so during the academic year, we read articles and engage in workshops that get us to reflect and interrogate our practice with the intention of equipping writers at all levels with the resources they need to become more skilled and more confident. Do we always get it right in consultations? No. It would be foolish of me to expect any one of you to always get it right. But as a Writing Center director, I expect engagement and critical reflection. That's the engagement I'm interested in. If a mistake was made, why did it happen? What role did you play? What role did the student play? How can you make your consultations better based on our shared understanding of the literature, and at the same time be okay with feeling uncomfortable interrogating your own practice? Me being here doing what I'm doing, that's radical by itself. And at the same time, I can also say, there have been times when I've intentionally chose apathy and wish I hadn't. But one way or another, my positionality in this space, in many spaces as a Black man, is radical. As the historical and social construction of whiteness in America perpetuates this Black-white dichotomy. Everything about me, my people, my culture comes from resilience, resistance. That's why I'm radical. That's why we radical. Y'all continue to remind us of everything that ain't for us, everything that we need to change about us to fit in. And I'm going easy right now, because I didn't say nothing. I haven't brought up again anything about oppression, violence, rape, exploitation. Part of the problem is your convenient forgetfulness of your past here in this country. And so, do Black people ever really fit in? How could we? But look at us. Look at me. We out here shining. So let's circle back to me and Amanda in that workshop. We decided we wanted to go past the performative gesturing of this we decided we wanted to go beyond the performative gesturing of this anti-racist work in writing centers. We wanted to do more than use lofty words and impersonal theoretical frameworks void of contextual and humanistic approaches rooted in radical action. I'm calling on Freire's humanism of unveiling the world of oppression and through praxis committing to its transformation. So I did some research, reflected, and by research, I looked in my big book of negotiations and conflict management. It's like huge. I reflected on some models, and then I shared this one, the integration adaptation model with Amanda and Maureen. We talked about it, unpacked it, and then I decided on that model to facilitate how writing centers can go about doing meaningful anti-racist work with your particular institution with your particular institutional context. And today, I was gonna try and unpack this dense theoretical framework and contextualize it in some kind of way to connect with y'all. I was never gonna give you the answers because I don't have them. I'm grappling with all of this from moment to moment, right along with you. I was gonna walk you through how to engage in this work, but after getting feedback from some of my peers, y'all know who y'all are. Some of y'all are in the room now. I appreciate y'all. And so after getting feedback from them and reflecting, I decided that all that's too much labor. I'm not gonna do the work for you. It's too much going on out here. We got COVID-19, these police still running amok, and our field is And our field is still trying to figure out how to treat Black and POC writers like we got some goddamn sense. So I decided I wasn't going to do all that. I'd rather spend my time riding my bike, walking my dog, partaking in socially distanced swim sessions at the pool with my girlfriend, you know, indulge in leisurely white activities. But for real though, I just want to live. So instead of all of that, instead of doing the work for you, I decided to demonstrate the integration adaptation model in my real lived experiences through some of the stories I've shared with y'all this morning. Our writing centers have two tasks: internal integration and external adaptation. There is a real tension between these two tasks in social spaces, in writing centers, because of our social, political, and economic differences. And so we need to continue to develop and refine our competencies. We are striving for integrative adaptivity. That's the goal. And so the IM model, integration adaptation model, offers 4 components for you to consider your micro and macro skills, processes, and structures. They are awareness, accuracy, adaptivity, accountability. I'll say it again. The IM model, integration adaptation, offers 4 components for you to consider your macro and micro skills, processes, and structures. They are awareness, accuracy, adaptivity, accountability. And so I was gonna provide y'all with a ton of resources and a ton of things like my writing. And then I realized that's me doing what I said I wasn't gonna do. So if you're interested in my work, in my blog post, Errors, Mistakes, and Rhetorical Choices, Google me and find it. I've given you the information. If you're interested in my MAWCA paper, stick around. I'm gonna get that published one of these days. And if you're interested in the anti-racism workshop that was developed, pay for my labor if you want that context. And so the reason that I repeated it is because I've told you the model and I've given you information about the model. And so if you go in Google Scholar or any database, you should be able to find it. And then if you can't, ask a friend. So I've laid out all these breadcrumbs for y'all. So what are you gonna do? You gotta do more than call yourself radical. You gotta do more than call yourself an ally or an accomplice. As a matter of fact, Nisha and Green already told y'all at the BMET conference, if you gotta say you're an ally or an accomplice, odds are you probably aren't. So tell me about your work. What are you doing?